Okay, Pirkei Avos. We're now continuing in Perek Dalet, chapter 4, and according to the count that I'm using, we will begin today with Mishnah Ches, Mishnah 8, and the Mishnah says as follows: Rabbi Yossi Omer. Rabbi Yossi says, Kol hamechabed es haTorah, anybody who gives honor to the Torah, Gufo mechubad al habrios. Literally means like his body is honored by other creations. He's simply understood, it means he or she is honored by others. V'chol hamechalel es Torah, and whoever desecrates, dishonors Torah, Gufo mechulal al habrios. So then that person is dishonored by others. So on a very basic level, this is telling us, and really could be contrasted with a famous teaching, perhaps more famous teaching of Pirkei Avos from Ben Zoma. Ben Zoma says, who is honored? One who honors others, one who honors the brios. That if a people see somebody giving honor to others, then they'll honor that person. And this is telling us, maybe a step higher, that if a person honors the Torah, then others will honor them as well. And the way that the Midrash Shmuel cites it is that people of more elevated character will honor them. That they're mechubad al habrios. Brios means like creations, but people who have attained kind of a higher level of creation, a higher purpose. They've I don't want to say achieved their purpose, but they're closer to achieving their purpose in creation. That that there's a natural tendency, perhaps more basic level that anybody could attain, which is that they'll honor people who honor others, and that's good and that's important. Not everybody will honor those who honor the Torah, but those who are brios, those who have reached a level of recognition of what this world is about. So those are the people who will honor those who honor the Torah. So it's a more limited group that will honor a person who honors Torah. It's limited to brios, to people who have attained or are close to attaining their purpose in creation. So that's one, just a simple reading of the teaching. Again, is one who honors Torah, they'll be honored by others. One who desecrates and dishonors Torah will be dishonored by others. The Midrash Shmuel then cites from someone named Rabbi Yehuda ibn Shushan, I think it's Rabbi Yehuda ibn Shushan, who uses this opportunity to paint for us a picture of what it means to honor Torah. And and he describes three different ways in which we can and should honor the Torah. And first he explains that a person has to realize the incredible gift and the incredible value of Torah, the splendor of Torah. It's not something you could put a price tag on, and it's deserving of the highest honor. It is the will of Hashem given to us, manifest in this world. And it's not to be dismissed, and it's not to be taken lightly. And there's three ways in which a person honors Torah. Number one is honoring and in their approach to the words of Torah themselves. The second is in how we relate to somebody who is great in Torah, who's a Talmid Chacham, a Torah scholar. And the third is how we relate and how we deal with Svarim, with books of Torah, with Sifrei Torah, Torah scrolls, Torah books, etc. So the first category, which is how we approach Torah study, we have to remind ourselves what we're encountering, that we're encountering the wisdom of Hashem and this tremendous gift. but it's not to be taken lightly. And I think sometimes we do take it very lightly, forget what we're what we have the opportunity to to approach, to learn, to encounter. We forget the great gift that the Torah is, and we forget where it comes from, and we don't treat it with the proper honor. And so, first of all, first of all, he says we have to make sure that we are properly clean and our hands are clean and our clothes are clean. We have to treat the study of Torah with respect. And furthermore, he says we have to approach it with awe and wonder and fear, and we should almost tremble when we say the words of Torah and when we learn the words of Torah, because and when we read Hashem's name, when we read God's name in learning Torah, because this is uh this is the wisdom of Hashem revealed to us. He mentions, again, quoting from I think it's Rabbi Yehuda ibn Sasson, it just gives me the abbreviation, or Rabbi Yaakov ibn Shushan, that he's very bothered to see people just frivolously casting off songs that are verses of Torah in the marketplace and in unclean places, and not realizing and not caring that the words that they're saying are holy and shouldn't just be recited casually in places that are unfit to mouth words of Torah. Furthermore, he says that we have as part of our davening, part of the morning tefillos at the very end, in the Uval Etzion. So in that paragraph, we say, Baruch Elokeinu, blessed is Hashem, Shebarano lichvodo, who created us for his honor, v'hivdilano min atoim, and he separated us from those who err, those who don't have Torah, those who don't have knowledge of Torah, those who don't have the wisdom of Torah. And he says that should be said with incredible passion and kavana and intent, as if you are in front of a fiery furnace, tied up, about to be thrown in, and you're saved and you're granted a great kingdom instead. So he paints the picture. A person is tied up, they're about to be cast into a fiery furnace, and instead they're freed and given a great kingdom. What is that? What's that a metaphor for? He says that a person could have been could have had a life without any Torah, and that's the fiery furnace, a life without Torah, and they're saved and they're given a tremendous kingdom. They're given the tremendous gift of Torah, and that's how a person should imagine themselves. You don't have to use that exact metaphor, but to appreciate when we say in the morning, at the end of davening, we say, Baruch Elokeinu, blessed is Hashem, who separated for us from those who wander, or those who err, those who wander, those who don't have Torah, and the Nasan Lana Torah Semes, and he gave us, those are the words, and he gave us the true Torah. So it's an incredible gift. And when we say, I think most of us who do say it probably just say it without thinking, but he's telling us, he's reminding us that we have to appreciate the gift of Torah. And when we are in shul and we're listening to the Torah being read, we should listen intently, carefully, and not talk. So that's all in the first category of giving proper honor to Torah study. It's to recognize the incredible gift, to make sure that we are dressed appropriately, that we're in an appropriate place to study Torah, that we approach Torah with awe and wonder and fear, and we don't just frivolously mouth words of Torah in the wrong places at the wrong times, and that we thank Hashem for the incredible gift that we have and that He allowed us to have it, and not and that we're not amongst those who don't have it. The second category of giving honor to Torah is to give honor to Torah scholars. Um, the Torah says, "As Hashem Elokecha tira," that you should be in awe of Hashem your God, and the word "es" is extra. And Rabbi Akiva teaches us that "es" comes to teach us about Talmidei Chachamim, that we're not only to be in awe of the Torah of Hashem, but to His representatives in the world, the Talmidei Chachamim, the great Torah scholars, and not be dismissive of them. And I think at times a Torah scholar might say something that we don't agree with. And so if we have our own tradition and our own Torah scholar that we're following, so okay, but we can't be dismissive of what the other one says, and it has to be that their words have to be revered. We have to recognize that a Torah scholar is a walking Sefer Torah, and it has to be given the proper kavod, they have to be given the proper honor. And then the third category is Sfarim, books of Torah, certainly Sifrei Torah, the actual Torah scrolls, those have to be given the highest honor. But even the Jewish books that we have in our house, the Sfarim. So again, I think we have them around. Sometimes we treat them a little casually because we don't have this constant awareness of what this is. This is a book with the wisdom of Hashem in it. And so we might put them in places that put them down on a counter that's not necessarily so clean, or in a bag that it could get dirty, or he says he has a suggestion. He says you should make a shelf, just like you have a shelf to put food and keep it away from the rats. You should make a shelf for books. Right now, I think we definitely have those now, but again, they should be, when we carry them, when we have them, we should treat them with the proper honor, and not touch them with dirty hands, etc. So a book of Torah is a representation. It holds words of Torah, and if we build our awareness of the proper honor that we need to give to Torah, then we'll also give proper honor to books of Torah. So again, three areas that we can consider in terms of giving proper honor to the Torah, to the wisdom of Hashem, to the words of Hashem, is in the way that we learn Torah, in the way that we relate to Torah scholars, and in the way that we relate to books of Torah. Another way that we honor Torah is when we learn it, and how we learn it, and how we treat each word. And the example that he quotes from Rabbi Ovadia Mibar Tanura is that one is doresh, one elaborates and considers every extra word, every extra letter, and there's nothing there that's extra. So that's kavod Torah, that's honor to Torah, because that's if it comes from Hashem, then it's divine, and everything is important in it. And actually, this is an allusion to something the Mishna teaches us at the end of Sota. The Mishnah says that when Rabbi Akiva died, the batla kavod Torah, the honor of Torah, was nullified. And what that means is that Rabbi Akiva had an incredible level of honoring Torah, and Rashi actually explains there this very point, because Rabbi Akiva learned every little crown, every little dot, every extra letter, everything he saw as meaning something, and he sought to discover and uncover what the meaning is. That's a tremendous kavod for Torah. And again, sometimes I think when we learn Torah, we have so many questions. So there's so many questions. Why is this word here? Why does this repeat itself? And so at times we come to think there must not be an answer. There must not be answers because there's so many questions. It's random. There's no answer. But proper kavod Torah, proper honor of Torah says there's an answer. Now, we may not know it, we may not ever learn it, but it's worth exploring. And there are answers, and there are amazing svarim, amazing explanations out there for the most the smallest little change in one section to another, and extra letter, extra this, extra that, something missing, something here that should be there. All of it, if we approach it with the proper perspective, this is the divine word of Hashem, then there are answers, there are explanations. And that's another way that we give kavod, we give honor to Torah, is learning it with the right perspective, with that perspective of everything here has deep, deep meaning to it. An additional way in which we honor Torah is through our actions and through our conduct and through our midos, through our character traits. And this is pointed out by the Meiri that when a person, the Gemara tells us, and I mean it's obvious, but the Gemara has a very beautiful description of it, that if a person's midos, if a person's character is good, then people see that person and they say, wow, praised is the person who taught that person Torah. In other words, our conduct, sometimes we think of Kiddush Hashem, of sanctifying God's name. That's what we focus on, and that's true too. But it's also a sanctification of Torah. It brings honor to Torah. A person who conducts themselves honorably and respectfully and with beautiful midos, with beautiful character in the way that they interact with others. So what kavod, what honor that brings to Torah? So nothing to do with how, now one has to learn Torah and one has to work on their midos, on their character in order to achieve that. And that's why it brings honor to Torah. But in that sense, it's not bringing honor to Torah in the way that we interact with Torah, it's bringing honor to Torah in the way we interact with others. So, so that's another way in which a person brings honor to Torah, is just through their actions and their character and how they relate and interact with others. Okay, so I think for that Mishnah, that's probably good. So a few points here that we made in terms of the Mishnah Ches, Mishnah 8. Rabbi Yossi said, all who honor Torah, so they become honored by others. And we explained what it means to honor Torah. There's honoring Torah in how we learn Torah, both in how we dress, where we learn Torah, the attention that we give to it, and then in the way that we consider the words themselves, that we recognize that they're divine and they come from Hashem, and there's tremendous meaning here, and there's always more to be discovered, and every nuance is important. That's learning Torah with kavod, with giving it proper honor. There's honoring those who represent Torah, Torah scholars. There's honoring the works of Torah, books of Torah, which carry the word of Hashem in them. And then there's honoring Torah through our own personal conduct and midos, that when we conduct ourselves with beautiful character, then that also brings honor to Torah. Okay, Mishnah Tes. Mishnah number 9. Rabbi Shmuel beno Omer. Rabbi Shmuel, his son, would say. So this is Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi was the last Mishnah. Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yossi, would say, Hachosech atzmo min hadin. A person who refrains, holds back from judgment, Horik mimenu eva v'gazel shvuashav, rids themselves, throws off from themselves eva, which is enmity, hate, gazel, stealing, and shvuashav, and either false swearing or unnecessary swearing. V'hagas liba b'hora, but one who is arrogant, here they say presumptuous, in hora, in ruling, in giving judicial rulings, shota rasha v'gas ruach. They are foolish, they are rasha, they are wicked, and they are gas ruach, and they are arrogant. So we seem to be comparing somebody who refrains from judging versus one who is arrogant and quick and presumptuous to pass judgment. Now, on a simple level, we're talking about a judge, not just individuals in daily life, but a person who is going to sit as a judge. Now, in the previous Mishnah, we mentioned a person who honors Torah and a person who desecrates Torah. That was Rabbi Yossi. So the Midrash Shmuel, in his first explanation, says that Rabbi Shmuel, his son, is coming to give examples of that, of a person who honors Torah and a person who dishonors Torah. So, and in his first explanation, he's not talking about the judge. He's talking about a person who has some kind of monetary question with another person, that they perhaps owe somebody money. Maybe it's questionable if they really owe it. Maybe it's not. But a person, even if it's not, may want to wait till there's an official judicial decision that comes down that I owe the money before I pay it. So the Mishnah tells us that a way to honor Torah is to be choseich atzmo medin, to refrain from judgment, meaning to refrain from having to go to court. To just, if it's believed that you owe money, then pay up, then pay the money. And and if you do that, then you create a Kiddush Hashem. You sanctify God's name, and you bring honor to Hashem's Torah. And so that's accomplishing what the previous Mishnah was teaching. And you also remove enmity, robbery, and false swearing. So, because if a person says, well, I probably owe it, but let's just find out in court if I really owe the money, if it's to the point that they can actually obligate me to pay, I'd rather go to court. So that will create enmity with the other side. That will create the potential for stealing, because maybe the court won't be able to obligate the person to pay, but they really owe it, and then they're stealing. And it could lead to unnecessary or false vows, because once you end up in the courtroom, then certain situations you have to swear, and one might swear falsely, or maybe it just wasn't necessary. You should have just paid from the outset. So a person who knows that they owe, so it doesn't have to go to court. Just honor the obligation and pay what one owes. On the other hand, you might have somebody who's gas libo behora, who's presumptuous in giving a judicial decision. In other words, they say, I don't really owe it, and if you want me to pay, you got to take me to court. So then, number one, so number one, the person is foolish. Number two is they're wicked. They're trying to steal from their friend. And number three, they're arrogant, that they think that through going to court they'll trick the judges and they'll be able to escape owing. So this would be talking about, I guess, somebody who knows that they really owe, but they say, well, even if I technically owe, but unless they can actually prove it in court, I'm not going to pay. So let's go to court. So they're first of all foolish, second of all wicked because they're trying to steal, and third, they're arrogant for they think they can trick the judges when hopefully they won't succeed. So that is a dishonor to Torah. That's a dishonor to Torah to be in that position. Okay, so that could be it's talking about a potential somebody who owes the money. It could also be talking about, I think the simpler reading is that's talking to a judge. And somebody who's a judge, they're in a position that they're supposed to judge. They're supposed to rule on monetary questions. So if they really insist that the person make a ruling, come with a ruling, then they should. But it's always good to try to bring about a compromise, a pshara, a compromise. And and if you do, so in other words, if the judge can say, listen, if you want me to judge the case, I could, but why don't you try to work it out between yourselves? That's who it could be talking to. Hachosech atzmo min adin. Somebody who tries to refrain from judging. They're in a position to judge, but they if they can, they try to say, listen, I'd rather that you work it out yourselves. And if they do that, first of all, nobody will hate them because the people will come to an agreement. If they are forced to judge the case and rule like one party or the losing party might come to hate the judge. So so by encouraging them to work it out between themselves, the judge number one avoids hate. Um, he avoids stealing because if he makes a ruling and it's the wrong ruling, then he's causing stealing. Well, if they agree, then they agree. If they come to an agreement, then they come to an agreement. And and number three, um, he could end up enforcing a vow incorrectly if they end up in a court case. So if he can, he should try to encourage them to work it out on their own. Again, if they can't and they insist on being judged, then fine. But the first course to take, according to Rabbi Yishmael, would be to try to encourage the parties to work it out. However, if a person doesn't do that and he says, "Oh, you came to me, of course, I'm the greatest judge on earth. I will come to the right decision." So he's gas libo behora. He's presumptuous. He's arrogant in coming to a ruling. So um, so first of all, it's foolish. He's just going to create enemies at best. Like doesn't need to be. If he doesn't need to be in this situation, then why bother? Number two, he's wicked because he seems to not really care if he gets the judgment wrong. He could end up one will end up stealing from the other. And number three, he's arrogant because he thinks that he knows everything and he's for sure going to come to the right decision. So it's an interesting perspective, but it's really saying that when two parties come to a judge to decide a monetary case, from the judge's perspective, he's best off encouraging them to try to come to a compromise or an agreement on their own, and that way you can't get the judgment wrong. You can't get it wrong if you don't make a judgment. If they just agree to something on their own, um, and and if they can't come to an agreement, so then it would be proper for him to judge. But otherwise, by avoiding having it judged in court, you avoid enmity, you avoid stealing, and you avoid unnecessary vows. Um, the Meiri says something that I think is applicable to everybody, and that is that it's telling you that when it says gas libo behora, that you're here they translate presumptuous. Gas libo usually means like arrogant in judgment. But there's different ways one could be arrogant in judgment. One is to rush to make a decision, to rush to make a judgment. That could be a judge in court. That could be a question of what to do in life that somebody has. Person rushes to a decision, and even if they're not sure. Now, where's the arrogance there? The arrogance could be that they say, well, I'll be able to defend my position after. I'll figure it out afterwards, right? So you make your decision, and then you say, I'll figure out how to explain it afterwards. And if a person is arrogant, they think they're very smart, then they'll be able to justify it, to explain it afterwards. So let's focus for a second on a judge. You have a judge. He's presumptuous. He's arrogant. He quickly comes to a decision. This is the ruling. And he says to himself, if they question it later, I'll figure out how to explain it, how to justify it. And or you have somebody who maybe they didn't rush to judgment, but they made a call and it turned out they were wrong. And what do they do afterwards? They they defend it to death. They will not back down. And that's what it's talking about. Gas liba b'hora, somebody who's arrogant in their ruling. They are foolish, they are wicked, and they are arrogant. And uh, and this is not just for a judge, but this happens all the time in life, where a person might be make a quick decision and only realize after, and either tell themselves, I'll justify it afterwards, and then they'll do whatever they can to justify what they did. A person acts instinctively, does something instinctively, and then they figure I can justify it later. Or they didn't they maybe they make a careful decision, or gave advice or gave an answer, and then afterwards it turns out that they're wrong. Um, but people are stubborn. We're all stubborn, and it's very hard to admit that we're wrong. And and people try very hard to defend their decisions and their opinions, even when they know deep down that they make a mistake. And the Mishnah is reminding us that it's foolish, it's wicked, and it's arrogant. And I think at times all of us, at times need to take a step back and question and if especially when we find ourselves in an argument with somebody, which does happen to most people at some point, and we have to just try to take a step back, take a deep breath, and examine, am I defending this position because I truly believe in it, I believe it to be correct, or am I defending this position because it's what I said first? And I don't want to I don't want to admit that I was wrong. I don't want to admit that I acted instinctively or quickly and wasn't careful. And it's hard. It's really hard to admit that we're wrong, but it's also such an important trait to be able to do that. And takes humility, but it's so important. And the Mishnah here is bringing out that point. On the opposite side, it's saying if one is gas liba, one is arrogant in their rulings, they're presumptuous, they're quick, then and they won't back down, they're stubborn to defend their decision. It's foolish, it's wicked, and it's arrogant. And we have to try to do the opposite. Be thoughtful and be humble and realize that sometimes we do something, we say something, we decide something, and sometimes we're just wrong, and we have to be able to admit it. Okay, continuing on to the next Mishnah. Let me just summarize actually what we said about that Mishnah. So the Mishnah said that one who refrains from judgment. So by refraining from judgment, they avoid enmity, stealing, and false or unnecessary vows. So it could be talking about somebody who could potentially go to court over something, and they say, no, I'll just pay it. You don't need to take me to court. I know I owe it. I'm going to pay it. And by doing that, first of all, building on the last Mishnah, they bring honor to the Torah. And second of all, through avoiding a court case, they avoid enmity, they avoid stealing, and they avoid unnecessary vows. On the other hand, if a person says, I know I owe it, but I'm not going to pay it until you extract it from me in court. So it's foolish, it's wicked, and it is arrogant. It could also be talking to a judge who is a case is brought to him, and his first option should be to try to get them to work it out themselves, because that way you avoid enmity, you avoid getting the decision wrong and stealing, and you avoid unnecessary vows, as opposed to somebody who says, sure, I'll judge, I know all the answers, I know I'm going to get it right. That is arrogant and foolish and potentially wicked, because you might get it wrong and end up stealing. And lastly, we mentioned that on an individual level, a person who's gas liba bahara, who's presumptuous in judgment, it could be in judging a case, it could be in answering somebody's questions, it could be in making decisions, it could be things that we deal with in our daily lives, that we make a decision or we give an opinion, and then we decide either we'll defend it later, we'll figure it out later, or we even when we realize that or we don't realize we're wrong, it turns out we're wrong, and we're stubborn to defend it, and that is foolish, wicked, and arrogant, and it takes great humility, but it's so important to be able to stop, take a step back, and really try to determine if what we said, our opinion, our position is actually correct, or if we're just defending it because it's what we initially said and it's hard for us to back down. Okay, on to Mishnah Yud. Mishnah Yud says, Hu Haya Omer. So another teaching of Rabbi Shmuel, he used to say, Al Tehi Dan Yechidi. Don't judge alone. She'ein dan yechidi al echad, because there's only one who judges alone. Doesn't say who, but it's talking about Hashem, seemingly. Only Hashem judges alone. The al tomar kablu daiti, and don't say to others accept my position. She'ein rashayin v'lo, because they are free, they're allowed, but not you. And we'll have to see what that could potentially mean. So we have don't judge alone, because there's only one who judges alone. Don't say accept my view, my position, because they are allowed and you're not. Okay, so what could this mean? So, Midrash Shmuel has a number of suggestions. His first is that it's speaking to a judge, but it's relevant to us as well. And it's telling them that don't judge alone, meaning don't judge an individual by himself without having the other side there. Both sides have to be there. If a person is going to judge a case, you have to have both sides present. And this is a halacha. The halacha is that you can't hear one side. A judge can't hear one side without the other side being present. And the reason is because if you do, then the judge will be much more biased to the first position. And actually, the Midrash Shmuel quotes an allusion to this in the verse. It says, Eila HaMishpatim Asher Tasim Lifnehem. The first verse in Parshas Mishpatim, which deals with a lot of the monetary laws, it says Asher. These are the statutes Asher Tasim Lifnehem that you should place before them. And he says that the word Tasim that you should, which means to place, you shall place, stands for Tishma Shneim Yachad Midabrim. You should hear the two of them together speaking. That both sides should be there when you are judging a case. And that's what it means. Don't judge alone, meaning not don't be a judge alone, but rather don't judge people alone. Make sure that both sides are present before you begin the case. The only one who can judge alone is Hashem, because he could judge one side without the other side being there, because Hashem knows everything and isn't biased, etc. And even though we're not judging court cases, but the idea is important still, which is that sometimes we only know one side of the story, and so we assume like that side. We hear our friend tell us that what happened to them and somebody wronged them and whatever, and it's important to be understanding and to be compassionate and listen to our friend or our family member or whoever it is. But always remember there's another side and there's another perspective, and don't pass judgment on the other side based on the one side that you've heard. And often it's not it's not our job to pass judgment. Like I said, it's our job to listen if there's no lashon hara. It's our job to listen and to be compassionate and to be understanding, and to empathize. But if we don't know both sides, then we should be very careful to act on what we've heard. Sometimes somebody tells us something again, often it might be lashon hara, which is its own issue, but we hear one side of the story, and it colors the way we look at the other, the person being described, and um, so besides for the lashon hara issue, but it's important to remember that there's another perspective, and as a general rule, people are good, and and every individual has their own reasons why they conduct themselves a certain way, and if somebody feels wronged by another, it could be the other person did wrong them, but there's another perspective and there's other factors, and it's important to keep that in mind. Okay, another idea when it says al tihi dang yichidi, don't judge alone, is that it's teaching a judge that you're not alone when you give judgment, even if you think you're alone, because Hashem's presence is there. And I think there's two aspects to that. One is that Hashem's presence is there and maybe assists a judge in coming to the correct decision. That's one idea. But he actually focused on the other side, that judge fairly because Hashem is watching. You're not alone. Even if a judge is judging alone, which in certain circumstances they might, but remember that you're not alone. Alti dang yichidi, don't judge alone. You're never alone. Hashem is watching, and be very careful in how you judge. And that last thing I think is also true for outside of the courtroom, right? When we make our decisions, when we give advice, when we whatever we do, we're not alone. Hashem is there. Hashem is watching us, and we keep that in mind, then it can guide us in the right direction. A third explanation that he gives is, don't judge alone. Don't think that you're judging this person alone, because in a certain sense, you are impacting what God is going to do as a result. What does that mean? Very fascinating idea. But he says that, let's say a person is a judge in a courtroom, and they decide that somebody has to pay money, when really that person shouldn't have had to pay the money. So they pay the money. Well, Hashem is going to make it up to them. If they unjustly had to pay, then Hashem is going to make it up to them, to find them a way to get them the money back another way. And if that's the case, then your decision to make them pay is impacting what you're kind of making. You're forcing God's hand in a certain way to get them to pay them back. And so remember, when you give judgment, don't think the only impact is on this individual. You're actually, in a certain sense, and it's a really novel and fascinating idea, but in a certain sense, you could be forcing God's hand in making sure that the person who lost out unjustly is going to get back what they deserve. And I mean, the implications of this are I think far and wide. That forget about a judge, by anybody, right? The way that we interact with others, and if we cause somebody to lose something unjustly, it's not just we're in a way we're forcing God's hand, and that is a heavy responsibility to imagine. Okay, let me just see if there is anything else that I want to make sure we say. It's just one more point. We didn't really talk about the second half of the Mishnah. The last idea I'll share is that the Midrash Shmuel quotes from Rav Moshe al-Mushnino, who says that this Mishnah is building off of the previous Mishnah. The previous Mishnah said, a person should refrain from judging, right? Best to step back, refrain from judging. Okay, so then who's going to judge the cases? If everybody's told not to judge, then how are we going to have a court system? Nobody's supposed to judge. So this Mishnah says, no, it's okay to judge. Just don't judge alone. If you judge alone, that's where you're going to run into problems. That's where you're going to run into what the previous Mishnah described. You're going to um, end up with enmity and stealing and incorrect vows, unnecessary vows. But if you're judging with others, if you have a court of three, a beis din, so then and you're not judging alone, so then you won't come to that. There won't be enmity. Nobody will be able to identify specifically who was responsible for obligating them. There's a court of three, and if you have a team on it, then you'll more likely come to the correct judgment. There won't be stealing. You won't have unnecessary vows. And then it says, um, that don't tell the other judges, kablu daiti. Don't say to them, just do what I say. Just follow me. Follow my lead. Right? Because the whole point of judging with others is that we're taking into account everybody's opinions, everybody's perspectives, and then you could arrive at the correct conclusion. And each person has their own free will and their own understanding. And if one judge just says to the others, just do what I say, then you lose the whole benefit of having multiple judges and multiple perspectives. So Hing Rashayim, they have permission, meaning they have like their own free will to decide as they see fit. So the end of the Mishnah, so this last explanation says that in order to avoid the errors and the problems described in the previous Mishnah of creating enmity and stealing and incorrect vows, the answer is don't judge by yourself. Get a team together, get a beis din together, and if you're judging with others, so then through discussions you'll come to the correct decisions. And as long as you don't tell them, just do whatever I say. And this again, I think there's a practical lesson even outside the courtroom as well, which is the benefit of making decisions with teams, with getting different perspectives in a person's work or shul or whatever it is. If you have one person just deciding, then you're going to be missing out. And just basically just accept my view. Just do kabu daiti. Just do what I think. So then there inevitably more mistakes will be made. Well, if you have it's somewhat obvious, but if you have a team, if you've taken different perspectives, then and you don't have an overbearing personality that just says do what I say, then do what I think, then you're more likely to avoid enmity. You're more likely to avoid other potential pitfalls. Okay, we'll hold there.
Thank you.